Hello and welcome to Game Theory. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon is here. We're going through the rest, well, at least the second third of our 24 under 24 in 24 list. So the best 24 and under players in the NBA in terms of long-term value league wide. We're going to talk a little bit at the top about what in the world the Suns are doing. Might talk a little bit about Guerschon Yabusele signing with the Sixers as well. But then we'll get right into the heart of this list. That'll only be like 10 minutes. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown. Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Oh! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? Man, I'm getting old, Sam. I'm getting old. Right now, as we record, this is the most embarrassing thing I've ever said publicly. I have an ice pack on my lower back because this morning I couldn't put my shorts on. I get up every morning, 6 o'clock, work out. I couldn't stand and put my shorts on because my back hurt. I couldn't lean over and I had to sit down just so I could lift my leg and get my shorts on correctly. Like, it sucks getting old, man. This is not something I've ever experienced before.
Yeah, Bryce, man, what's going on there, bud? I've had back problems in general, like throughout my life a little bit. Like I have like a very, very like slight, like the second vertebrae above my tailbone is like slightly out of position a little bit. So like once a year I'll wake up and just have like horrendous back pain where like I can't really move. So this isn't super new to me, but also I'm like 3 or 4 years younger than you and we're still here. So
yeah,
this is what happens. We're in our 30s, Bryce. This is tough.
It's getting close to the other one for me. Like you said, I'm a few years older than you. So I coach high school football in very small school. So people are gonna be like, what do you mean? But I've played scout team quarterback for our team the last 5-6 years because we're such a small school. We just don't have enough guys. There's no way I'd do it this year. Like last year I told the coach, like, I can't do it anymore. Like, this is it. I'm tapping out. I can't do it anymore. I can't, the pain is too much when I get home.
That's wild. That's pretty wild to me, in all honesty. That is wild to me that you were doing this to start, and wild to me that now you've hit the point where you can't do it. Because like you said, you work out every day, like you're doing good. You know, you're doing the right things by your body. And here I am, I'm, not doing the right things by my body in general. I watch a lot of movies. So, okay. Bryce, before we get into the 24 under 24 in 24 list, couple of random things that I kind of want to talk about very, very briefly. We're not going super long into these things. So first, yesterday, the Phoenix Suns, they waived both EJ Liddell and Nassir Little. Nassir Little will be stretched. For people who don't know, the way that the stretch provision works in the NBA, you multiply the length of the contract remaining by 2 and then add 1 year to that. Nassir Little, I believe, had something like $21-ish million left on his deal, 22. I think it might have been 22 now that I think about it.
Looks like 21.7 or something like that.
Right. So I did the math yesterday, and his cap hit this year will go from 6.75 million down to 3.1 million. Essentially, it's like those are the ballpark numbers. It might be like 3.075, whatever it is. The reason that the Suns did this is because as we've seen throughout the offseason, there just has not been much interest in taking these contracts that are long-term and just not particularly seen as worth what the player is worth, right? With the second apron being what it is now, NBA teams have been completely averse to going down the road of taking chances on contracts like this, really even like adding them in trades. So with that aspect of it, Nassir Little was like a starkly negative trade chip. There was an argument, I've seen it from Suns fans, I've seen it on the internet. They could have kept this contract to maneuver with future trades, right? Last year, that was really important that they had this deal because they did not have many contracts that really were in that kind of mid-range of contract stuff, right? So, they really only had like Grayson Allen, I think last year, that was between minimum scale and, the 16 million that Yusuf Nurkic makes outside of Nassir Little. So if they wanted to maneuver in trades, it made sense to have Nassir Little's deal to potentially see if they could find something that could happen. It didn't work out. By waiving and stretching Nassir Little, and you had to make this decision by August 31st. That's when the stretch provision, goes away for the rest of the year. It has to be done by August 31st. By stretching Nassir Little, and because they had 16 players guaranteed and still have 14 players guaranteed on their roster currently, the Suns are projected to save something like $22 million in luxury tax. So essentially, by cutting him, they save the amount of money that they would have to spend on his contract over the life of its contract. And that's just for this year. Next year, the number is, I think, like 18 or $19 million as well, based on the way that their roster is currently constructed. But that's all like a projection and it's more difficult to track, right? The scenario that's important here is that by waiving and stretching Nassir Little, they save $22 million against the luxury tax, basically. And that's just like an enormous number that is so worth, at the end of the day, moving on from Little and not having him on your books. Yes, they have to have this $3 million cap hit on their books for the next 7 years. But as the salary cap increases and increases and increases, that's going to be a lower percentage of the cap at the end of the day. I think this was probably the right move for them. Unfortunately, Little, he looked like he was really coming on in that third season in Portland. He had a really solid first half of the year and then tore his labrum. And then I think in the fourth year and maybe in the summer of between his third and fourth year as well, I think that he ended up having a core muscle injury that required 2 separate surgeries, maybe even 2 core muscle injuries that required 2 separate surgeries, just from, overuse maybe and trying to make different things happen. So to me, it makes sense that they decided to move on from Little. If I was another team, I'd probably be willing to try Nassir Little on a minimum, but even last year, he kind of dealt with a sore knee and things like that. So I understand this across the board from Phoenix, and it makes total sense to me. It gives them an open roster spot. Even if they were to, I would imagine the way this will work for them is that they could convert Jalen Bridges if they wanted to. Even if they convert Jalen Bridges and thus, the 3.4 million that you're saving gets cut by, I think, 1/3 basically. You're still saving something like 15 to 16 million, or no, 14 to 15 million, I guess, in luxury tax payments by cutting Little. And that still is a worthwhile endeavor, I think, for them.
I mean, looking at last year's roster, they had Allen at 9 million, Royce O'Neal at 9.5, Nurkic at 16.9. This year, you have Okogie at 8.25, Royce right under 10, Grayson at over 15, and Nurkic at 18. So you just have more numbers there to match if you need to do something. I don't know if this team needs to go get another high price guy, but if you need matching or you want to turn one of those numbers into 2 smaller numbers and get 2 players for more depth, you kind of have the numbers to do it. And then on Little stretch, I didn't even think about this until you brought it up. So in 28-29, he'll be making the vet, that's what the vet min is going to be. It's 1.5% of the cap, and that's what his is. And then it's going to be less than that over the final 2 years of it. So it's going to be a vet min or less contract by the end of this thing. And it's obviously barely over that, even in the couple years leading up to it. So it doesn't seem like much. I just kind of wondered, obviously the money's the biggest thing. I just wondered if talent from the young guys, do you think that played into this decision at all? was Oso or Jalen Bridges or Ryan Dunn, are any of those guys, like, do you think they've seen anything or felt a certain way that made them feel more comfortable about it? Or do you think it was simply Little wasn't able to do it and it saved some money?
I think it's probably just money at the end of the day. I think it's money is why. Look, maybe they've had, internal workouts and things like that, and they feel a little bit better about Ryan Dunn or something. But to me, it's probably just money. I don't know that if you're the Suns, you're expecting many of these guys to be anything other than back end of the rotation, given the way that, they just signed Royce O'Neal, right? They still have Josh Okogie. They still have, obviously Grayson Allen, who we think will be starting. Like, they have a pretty loaded kind of backcourt, right? They have a loaded kind of group that has a lot of different options there between Tyus Jones and Monte Morris at the point. We just had the conversation about, like, okay, do they bring, if Tyus is starting, do they bring Grayson Allen, or do they bring even potentially like Bradley Beal off the bench, right? So I think that this is just all about money at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just, and like I said, I like Jalen Bridges. Like, it'll be interesting. Like, good for him if he ends up getting on the standard contract, and that's what they do. And then obviously they go find another two-way. But yeah, they're kind of loaded depending on whether you want to play small or whatever. But they have a lot of those guys. Like you said, we talked through that, who's going to start, who's not with that roster.
Yep. So wanted to run through that. Like I said, Little probably worth like a interesting flyer for somebody on a minimum to see if he can recapture some of what he had in that third year in Portland. But not a guy that I think should be making $7 million a year at this stage of his career, given what he's shown. Okay. Last thing here before we get into this list, Guerschon Yabusele. Any thoughts on him to Philadelphia after what we've seen from him at the Olympics? Because I know that we kind of mentioned we might talk about that on this episode real quick.
No, just real quick. Looks like there's about 8 teams, according to Spot Track, that have an open roster spot. And then we mentioned the Cavs with the multiple spots right now. So there are some options out there for Little if teams are interested. He had a really good Olympics, really stood out, thought he played well. I thought this was a good move for the Sixers, right? To like go and add some depth here for the minimum. I know they have to, pay his buyout from overseas, but you add a guy that if he hits, he's a little bit older as well. And so if he, if he's going to be ready, it's going to be now. You're not like bringing him in to develop him. I'm sure they're hoping he's ready to go now. I feel like there's some minutes available at that spot, right? At the backup 4 behind. Yeah. Well, you're starting Caleb Martin and Paul George, I guess. So, whatever, Paul George is your starting 4-man, I guess, whichever one, whoever you want to say, or Oubre. But yeah, I think there's some minutes there, I guess is my point. So I could see him coming in and finding rotation minutes. It's not like you're signing him to start for you, but if he can give you some solid minutes off the bench, then that's a huge win for them.
Yeah, I think there are minutes. And I think that also he brings something a little bit different than a lot of the guys they have. Like, he brings something different than Caleb Martin at the 4, right? Like, he's a big, physical, stronger dude that I think kind of gives you like a little bit of matchup flexibility and versatility that can be valuable in certain matchups for you kind of down the road in the playoffs. And I think ultimately that's what they're thinking is like, this is, a playoff roster we're trying to build, right? And if there's a team that has kind of multiple stronger players on the court, multiple bigs, or, a situation where there's like a bigger wing, do we feel a little bit more comfortable with Yabusele guarding this bigger wing than, whoever our backup 4 was going to be, right? Yabusele's also turned into like a pretty real 3-point shooter. Like, he drilled 44.5% from 3 this year for Real, was it 36% the year before, and was it 40% for Real in 2021-22, and then 44% for Osvel in 2020-21. So he's really knocking down shots from the perimeter now. As long as that kind of goes toward the NBA line, I think this is a signing that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like I said, whenever there's an opening in the rotation where you could see minutes available, I think it makes sense, especially when you're talking about just over $2 million. Again, I know they had to pay the buyout, but if he makes shots, if he's able to, the NBA line is a foot longer than what he's playing on over there? Is it the same?
Above the
little
break, it's a little bit longer.
bit
It's even
longer.
like 2.5, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So if he can adjust it, make that adjustment and it's not a huge issue, then this is, again, I think this is Philadelphia trying to find ways to win on the margins, which you have to do when you're paying 51, 49, and $35 million respectively to your big three. And
Yep.
right now, I think they've done a decent job of it with the guys. Caleb Martin, I thought was huge. You get Kelly Oubre back. Drummond, I think, was a really nice signing. And then you get some vets like Gordon and Jackson and Lowry in the backcourt. Who knows? But here's a guy that's under 30 that still looks like he has plenty of kind of juice in what he's doing. And I like just that physicality that he plays with, I think is something maybe they were missing a little bit there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think all of that is right. Anything else you've seen around the league that you feel like we need to talk about before we get into our list?
No, not that I can think of.
Okay. So before we get into the list, we just have one small thing that we got to get to. We got to get to our friends over at Mando. Shout out the folks over at Mando. Look, I've recently just gotten back from a wine trip up to the Yarra Valley with my wife, and packing's always a nightmare, right? You never know what to pack. I either bring too much or not enough. My suitcase always ends up being just like so overstuffed with stuff. And one of the biggest dilemmas to me is like figuring out what hygiene products to take, right? Do I bring all these little tiny bottles of shampoo? Do I bring face wash? Do I bring body wash? Do I pour shampoo into travel size bottles? Where do I buy those travel size bottles? It's just really annoying. Here's the thing though. Mando's 4-in-1 acidified cleansing bar makes traveling so much easier. This 5-ounce bar is a game changer. It works as a shampoo, face wash, body wash, deodorant. And if you need a shaving lather, it can do that too. It's clinically proven to control odor for 24 hours. Mando's 4-in-1 acidified cleansing bar is formulated with a gentle alpha hydroxy acid that stops odor at the source. Regular soap just cannot compete because the pH is too high. Look, this bar simplified my hygiene routine and was the only thing I really needed to pack. Think of all the room I had in my suitcase for that extra pair of shoes, the snacks I needed for the trip up there when we drove, everything like that. The acidified cleansing bar comes in 3 cologne quality scents: Mount Fuji, Bourbon Leather, and Pro Sport. My favorite is the Bourbon Leather. And guess what? I have a special offer for you. New customers get that $5 off Mando's best-selling starter pack with that code Game Theory at shopmando.com. That's right. shopmando.com. Go to shopmando.com. Use that code Game Theory. Mando's safe to use anywhere on your body. It's created by a doctor. It's powerful enough for the toughest body odor, but gentle enough for every crevice. Plus, aluminum-free, baking soda-free, cruelty-free, dye-free, and it's vegan. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, a cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, and free shipping. So don't miss out. Use that code Game Theory at shopmando.com to get $5 off your starter pack. Simplify your travel and stay fresh with Mando. Okay, Bryce, before we get into actually naming the players, a recap on what we have already.
Yep.
How are we going about making this list? This will be very brief.
Oh, yeah.
The criteria is for eligibility on this list. Your birthday has to be after, or no, what is it?
Before.
You can't be.
You have to be 20. You still have to be 24 by the end of the year.
24 on December 31st, 2024.
So, for example,
that is our criteria.
Darius Garland's going to come up very early in this conversation. He is 24 until January 26th of 2025. So he made it by 26 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Jaren Jackson Jr. turns 25 just over under a month from now. He is not eligible. So it's not from right now. It's not the start of the season. The date we chose was the end of this calendar year. 24 during 2024.
Our criteria in general, I think that you and I both focused a little bit more on future value. Obviously, what you've shown at this point is incredibly valuable, right? What you have actually been able to showcase from your abilities matters at a really, really high level. Also, though, we are looking forward into the future and trying to determine 5, 7, 10 years from now who the best players 24 and under in the NBA will be, or who has had the best careers, essentially, among those players in the NBA. So the first episode, we did this. Reed Shepherd was 24. Jonathan Kuminga was 23. Derek Lively, 22. Jalen Johnson, 21. Keegan Murray, 20. Jalen Suggs, 19. The way Bryce and I did this, we each made a list of 24 guys. There were 20 names that were the same on that list. Not in the same order, but we both had them on that list. All 20 of those players made it. The last 4 names, I got to pick 2. Bryce got to pick 2. I picked Reed Shepherd and Jalen Johnson. Bryce picked Derek Lively and Jonathan Kuminga. We are now into the piece of the list where averages come into play. So where I had them ranked, where Bryce had them ranked, we averaged those 2 spots together. Whoever had the lowest number ended up higher on the list, essentially. That's everything we need to say. Right.
Yeah. The only other thing I like to add, just because I know sometimes people think about this, we do not care about contracts. We do not care if a player is already on the rookie scale max because they came in super young, or they're about to, or they're like, none of it matters. Reed Shepherd didn't make the list because he, has how many ever years on his rookie. None of it matters. All we're talking about is talent. Now, I do know for me, one thing I've tried to factor was, how good is the team they're on? Do I think that team's going to be good in the future? Those type of things. And we'll get into that, especially, I think, with our list today. And if you don't like that you didn't hear somebody's name from what Sam just read, go listen to the whole first episode. We mentioned probably 20 other names.
55 players total.
Yeah. So 30 other names of what we considered honorable mentions, guys we considered, and got pretty specific about who the first guys to just be right on the outs were.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. First player here. Darius Garland is our number 18 player. Darius Garland is, I believe, the oldest player on our list, right? The fact that he's still eligible for something like this is a little bit weird, but he is still quite young, right? I think he's played in the NBA for 5 years now, right? And has been an all-star before. So that's the kind of area that we're getting into now, right? We're getting into guys that, in my opinion, either have been all-stars already like Darius Garland or will be all-stars down the road. I think that from 19 on downward, the way we did this, it was kind of a nice break. Those players could, I think, sneak an all-star game at some point, could make an all-star game, certainly have a chance to make an all-star game. I don't know that it is, the most likely outcome. I think there is a tier break is basically what I would say. I think that 18 is kind of where there was a tier break at the end of the day. And Darius Garland is a former all-star, made it 2 years ago. Since Donovan Mitchell has been moved to Cleveland, he's taken a bit of a step back as an overall player. This year, he averaged 18 points, 6.5 assists, shot 45, 37, 83 from the field. Overall, his playoffs have been like a little bit less impactful than what you would like to see. Also, the defense still remains like a fairly real concern. But Garland, to me, is one of the best blends of shooting and passing in the NBA. His ability to get to his pull-up game and his ability to play in ball screens and have an incredible partnership with Jared Allen as a big man, for instance, makes him like a very real dynamic offensive playmaker. And while I do kind of worry about where his overall game fits in terms of playoff basketball, and that's why he fell maybe a few spots lower than what you would expect for a guy that has already made an all-star team, Darius Garland is a fantastic, fantastic player.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is all about the talent. And I'll be honest, this is me still projecting that him and Donovan Mitchell are not the backcourt for the next 5 years in Cleveland, that eventually he gets moved and he gets to go back to kind of running the show for a team. And maybe not like, this is still a tier for me of not maybe number one options, but you put him next to a number one option wing or a number one option big. If people remember, I've talked about Garland to San Antonio before this year's draft. Obviously with Steph Castle now, I don't know. We'll have to see what Castle becomes. But I love the idea of him going to play with a Victor Wembanyama. So whether it's Vic or somebody else, like as a big like that, or a really elite two-way wing, I still think Garland can be that second guy and the primary guy of a backcourt. And so that there was a little bit of projection for me with him in terms of potentially getting to a new team. But I think the talent, is pretty undeniable with this guy in terms of just how good he is.
Yeah, I mean, just one of the best handles in the NBA. Like you can see it as we're kind of talking on screen right now. If you're watching on YouTube, by the way, go over to YouTube, watch these on YouTube. You get to see like a little slide, kind of seeing stats and a little mini scout, and you get to see some clips of these guys kind of do what makes them special, right? So go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe over on whatever podcasting platform you utilize, right? Back to this thing. His handle's undeniably impressive. It's sudden. He plays with great pace. He does turn the ball over a little bit more than what you would like to see at times, right? I do think sometimes he can get like a little bit caught in the trees, like in that little mid-range area, and kind of end up, I don't want to say panicking, but can just kind of lose the ball just like a little bit. But the handle when he's in the open court and when he has like a little bit of time to operate is so sudden, so quick, and kind of vicious in terms of what he's capable of doing to break down defenders off the bounce. He's a real guy that can, hammer mismatches against bigs in a substantial way. Like he's just so quick and bursty with that handle where it's really, really difficult. In terms of the defense, this is probably where the biggest kind of concern is, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
I have felt like he has really struggled. Now, part of that is that he just isn't great defensively in ball screens. Part of that also is that he's playing with like undersized, guards and wings around him a lot of the time. Playing next to Donovan Mitchell means that there isn't somebody to take that crazy difficult perimeter assignment all the time. Like Isaac Okoro has to take the awesome, wing players a lot of the time. But if there's a great guard as well, which once you start getting into the best teams in the league, they have multiple creators out there all the time. I think that you have to build a very specific team around Darius Garland.
Sure.
And that's kind of where this list gets difficult for me, right?
Yeah.
I think Darius Garland is more naturally gifted probably as a playmaker than some of the guys ahead of him on this list. But when you think about building a team around that, you really have to have a great rim protector, and it's hard to find great rim protectors who can shoot. You have to have probably multiple great defenders who can also score, one of whom has to be a pretty real offensive like playmaker and secondary ball handler as well. It just becomes a little bit, it's slightly more difficult. Garland is this incredibly dynamic offensive player and is really, really valuable. It's just when you get into smaller players, I do think that you start to have some diminishing returns on what a player can be.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I think as we get through this, I think I know for my rankings, especially as I started to break tiers or within tiers, I tried to rank players who I thought had real two-way value higher than guys that were just maybe elite offensively, or guys who I thought maybe could eventually get to real two-way value, or the size, those type of things. I think that's important. It just flat out, Sam, it makes it easier to build around them. And right now, for the majority of the guys we're talking about, I don't think anybody left are guys we think are just going to be role players. I don't think they're just role players, right? I think we kind of ended off with Suggs on the last episode. And like you said, that was a good spot. I don't think we'd have any of these other guys ranked where they are if we don't think they're number one, number two type options, over the next 5 to 7 years. And it's just easier to build around ones whenever they can play it on the other end of the floor. So, I looked through my notes, like I mentioned, I'll try to stop mentioning it every time, but very little defensive comments as I was through guard. The ball handling came up a lot, and how he navigates secondary defenders with the ball handling and the creativity and shot making and all of that. But yeah, defensively, he's going to have to be insulated a little bit.
Yep. Look, I think he gets underrated as well as like one of the better passers in the NBA. Like his ability to pass off of a live dribble is absolutely outstanding. I think Garland is so capable of being like a primary guard option for a team. Like we have seen Darius Garland average over 20 points per game while averaging 8 assists per game before, right? Like his all-star season, 21.7 points, 8.6 assists per game, shot 46, 38, 89 with a true shooting percentage that was 2% above league average. Like Garland that year was absolutely dynamic. Is worth noting this year as well, we probably didn't get to see the best of Darius. Broke his jaw in like December or so, if I remember correctly. And from there, like that injury is hard, man, because if you break your jaw, like it hinders how much you can eat. It hinders keeping your weight up. Like I think he said that he lost like something like 10 to 12 pounds over the time that he was dealing with that injury. So how he comes back from that will be really, really important. We probably did not get to see the best of Darius Garland this year. Also, I do think that the fit between he and Donovan has been a little bit precarious from the jump in terms of playoff basketball. I will be interested to see how the Cavs kind of navigate that situation moving forward.
And one final thing, like that 21-22 team was an above 500 team. But when you look at pace of the teams he's played on, not exactly flying up and down the floor, right? Not getting a ton of possessions with JB, 25th, 26th, 30th. That was 22, 23. Even this last season, they were 22nd in pace. So he's put up some pretty impressive numbers where it's not like, it's not like they were playing like the Pacers or, even a top 10 pace team. They're a little bit slower, two bigs, spacing stuff. We'll talk about a player that's really close that I've watched every second of later, and I'm sure we'll talk about spacing. I'm not saying he's been in a bad situation. I'm just saying it's not like you can say his numbers are inflated because the team's flying up and down the court and he has the best spacing in the world. He's played with two bigs for the majority of his career. So I'm glad he landed here. I feel really good about this. I'm interested to see the feedback if people think it's too high or too low. Cause my gut says people are going to think too high. And I think sometimes it can be forgotten how talented he is.
Yeah. I think that is not unfair. Okay. Next up, and this is where I think we might start to get yelled at.
Sure.
Number 17 is Scoot Henderson for us. Scoot Henderson was my number 2 overall prospect in 2023 NBA draft.
Same.
You guys will see that's not how I feel at this point. Whenever we go through and see where Brandon Miller is, because little quick spoiler for later on, Brandon Miller isn't coming tonight. Brandon Miller's coming in the future.
With all due respect, we're probably going to get yelled at for that one as well. I have a feeling
we probably will.
But I'm okay with it. Well, honestly, Sam, the next guy we're going to talk about, same draft class. So we both had this guy number 2, and based on our rankings, he's number 4.
That is correct. Yeah. Scoot averaged 14 points, 3 rebounds, 5.4 assists last year. The shooting splits were really just quite poor. Like really, really quite poor at the end of the day. 38.5, 32.5, 81.9 from the field. His true shooting percentage was 16% below league average. Averaged 3.4 turnovers per game. If you watch him, he just looked sped up. Like he looked like a teenager playing basketball. He looked like a teenager struggling with the speed of the game and trying to adjust. The thing that you and I talked about all season throughout the year, it is fucking impossible to play lead guard in the NBA as a teenager. That's just not something that in any way, shape, or form, anybody but the absolute fucking best in the league, Trae Young and Ja Morant, really are the only 2 guys that have come in at that age and been like unbelievable from the jump. And by the way, Ja Morant was like a year older than what Scoot Henderson is. Trey is really the only guy that has come in as a one and done point guard that is like an undersized-ish point guard and been successful. And I can give you an example of this. So here over on StatHead, right? A comparison to De'Aaron Fox and Darius Garland in their rookie seasons. Scoot Henderson averaged more points, rebounds, assists, right? Whatever. Shot a little bit worse from the field. Was in the middle of those two from the three-point line, middle of those two from the free throw line. In terms of the advanced numbers, was basically right there with Darius Garland. Both had a negative 5.5 BPM. De'Aaron's defense was a little bit more valuable, so he ended up with a BPM just slightly higher. And he was just like slightly more efficient as a finisher around the basket. From like a VORP perspective, all of them quite poor, all of them quite negative. All of the advanced numbers, anything that you see will tell you it is exceptionally fucking hard to be a lead guard in the NBA at 19 years old. And that's what makes Trae Young as special as he is, right? Like, I think we underappreciate how good Trae Young is. Now, Scoot is an entirely different player than Trae Young. Scoot is much more of a power player, much more of a physical player that changes speed super well, decelerates super well, but also has some real explosiveness and some pop, right? Has suddenness. I am in no way, shape, or form. Actually, I'm a little bit surprised. I shouldn't say I'm in no way, shape, or form. I was surprised Scoot struggled as much as he did last year. Also, I think that the level Scoot was at was much more in line with guys like Darius Garland and De'Aaron Fox whenever I and most others had a greater appreciation for him as a prospect than those guys entering the league. And in reality, he might just end up being more in their ballpark than in like the next upper echelon beyond them ballpark.
I mean, I think we split the middle here, and that's why I think I'm comfortable with where we have Scoot for a couple of reasons. One, we weren't like, we didn't keep him number 2 in that class, which I think is probably fair. But also, I'm not willing to throw out my scout 1 year removed from the draft class. Not whenever he did some things. I mean, if you look over his last 25 games, 17 points, 6.5 assists, 3.5 rebounds, 41% from the field, 36% from 3 on 5 attempts, and 88% from the free throw line. Now he turned the ball over a lot. I get it. Like there are some things that aren't great, but it wasn't just like, oh my gosh, he doesn't know how to play basketball. Now we get another full season, Sam, and the numbers are very similar, and we did this next year. I think a 2-year sample size is a little bit more, right? We can start to kind of make some other proclamations. My second part is you don't take a guy number 2 and not give him every chance in the world. So some of this to me is opportunity. When we start to get into this range, it's guys that have the chance to be the guy or have the ball in their hands all the time or whatever. Scoot is going to get that opportunity in Portland, in my opinion. I don't think number 3. Portland didn't take him number 3 to not give him those opportunities on ball and build this thing around him in some sense. So that's where those two things, I can't completely throw out my scout of him, and I can't ignore the fact that he's on a team and an organization that's going to really give him a chance.
So this is a really good question. What is Scoot's special skill? Garland had the ball handling and passing. De'Aaron Fox had the speed, right? To me, Scoot's ability to blend power with ball handling and like a certain level of speed still allowed him to get to his spots. Like the problem for Scoot last year was not getting to the spots on the court in the middle of the court. It was, he really struggled to finish around the basket last year. It was, he really struggled with his decision-making tree a lot of the time. Right? I think that in general, that is the stuff that tends to improve as you get better. and you get more experience and you get older and you get stronger and you get more physical. And the thing that we know about Scoot Henderson is he's an unbelievable worker. Like, any of the intel says that this guy is an incredible, incredible worker. There's no worry about him like coming in and not doing the right things. We've seen it in terms of the improvement as a shooter already, right? I would say he is ahead of where he was entering the NBA as a shooter already. I think he made something like 36% of his threes out of ball screens this season, made something like 34% of his shots off the dribble in general from three this past season. I think Scoot is still going to be an all-star, is where I'm at. I thought entering the NBA, Scoot was probably going to be like an all NBA player. I think I was probably wrong about that now. I think he has a chance to be that, to be sure. Very real chance. But like, I thought Scoot was probably going to be like a multiple time all NBA player. I think he's probably more of like that all-star quality point guard now, in that De'Aaron Fox, Darius Garland, that kind of tier of guard, as opposed to what I thought coming in, which I think, we saw struggles with this year.
Yeah, so I broke mine into tiers when I did this, and I won't spoil it, but I had MVP, all NBA level guys, and then kind of like primary creators / high level secondary guys. And Scoot was in that tier, which is essentially like, hey, they may make an all-star, but they're not all NBA level players. So yeah, I'm in the same area, and I thought the same on my scout with Scoot, that he would be that. I wasn't one of those that thought he was in the same range as Wemby at all whatsoever. It was very much a battle of him versus Brandon Miller. I also have always thought Scoot, for all the explosiveness and all of that talk, I thought he played with great pace. Like, I remember the first time I watched him play, I think as a 17-year-old with the Ignite, what stood out to me was the pace he played with and reading ball screens and all of that. And then I will say, I'm not going to sit here and say that Scoot Henderson is not a negative on defense right now. That would be crazy, right? But he has the physical tools and makeup to be at least neutral on that end of the floor with his strength and his length. He's not 6'1", 185. He's a 6'3", over 200 pounds. Not a ton of versatility with matchups, but I think there is a world where if he locks in, he can contribute to an overall defense. Like, you don't have to hide him if he would lock in on that end of the floor.
I agree with that totally. Look, I see reason to have concern. I shouldn't say I see no reason to have concern. I definitely see reason to have concern with Scoot. I still think the ceiling, based on what we saw this year, is very high. The key to me for young guards is, how do you get to your spots? What do you look like when you get to your spots? What does your decision-making look like when you get to your spots? I felt like early on the decision-making was like a calamity. Like, he was all over the place and had like no idea, but he was still getting into those areas in the middle of the court where he was quite dangerous, especially out of ball screens. The difference between him and like Garland, him and De'Aaron Fox, is that he is so much stronger than those guys in terms of like his physical frame. He can already keep guys on his hip, like in a pretty real way. It is, what do you do once you get into that area? For a long time, he had like, okay, I'm going to step back and get to that mid-range jumper, right? He made like 41% on those this year, pull up mid-range jumpers. I would like to see him get to more of a 2-foot jump stop floater more often than what we saw this year, right? Like, this year he took 67 runners and only made, he took 93 runners. So like basically 1 to 1.5 per game versus, 3 per game basically of pull up mid-range jumpers. I almost think that those things should be reversed, right? But that's part of growing and becoming more comfortable with the NBA game. I think that when you look at small guards, these are the things that they struggle with at the end of the day. These are the areas where things get difficult for them. I agree with you. Like, it was funny to watch him defensively this year. He was so wildly like over aggressive. It felt like to me all the time. He was just like fouling everywhere. But I don't know. Like I liked the aggressiveness on some level too for a rookie that was in a situation where like it didn't matter if they were winning or losing because they weren't a contending team this year, right? I liked that he showed growth throughout the year. I think that's like an incredibly important thing.
Sure.
As you mentioned with the numbers, they showcase it. But if you just watched him play, like it really seemed like the game started to slow down the more that he played. He didn't overdrive as much. I felt like early in the year, overdriving was like a huge, huge issue for him as he was running through his ball screens. But then, like in the second half of the year, he would be patient. He would kind of string out a dribble or two. He'd get guys on his hip. He would throw like a little flip pass to the wing and hit a shot maker. Like I thought it got easier for him throughout the year. I think that will continue to happen as he continues to improve as a shooter, continues to improve his overall frame and continues to get stronger. Because here's the thing, guys that are 19, 20 years old, they don't stop growing. Like, even if you're strong, like some guys do max out a little bit earlier, right? But he's going to get stronger over the next 2 or 3 years and like get more physical as he continues to, get into an NBA style weight room that will work with his frame and everything. I have no real, I'm not worried about him being like a very high level lead guard. I think that like the all NBA stuff is like a worry. If he's,
Sure.
he might not be that is where I'm at. But in terms of what he can be, is it like an all-star guard? I still would project him being an all-star guard at this point.
Yeah. And again, I just want to like, he's going to get the opportunity. And that's what it comes down to is like, he's going to get a chance to do that. One other number that will be interesting to track this year for me is what he shoots at the rim. So on B-ball reference, 0 to 3 feet, 50%. He's got to get better there. Somebody that's as explosive and strong as he is, and the wingspan and all of that, he's got to finish better at the rim. I'm not crazy surprised. I've watched someone not near his level, but watching Jaden Ivey deal with these struggles, you watch guys improve. They learn to take the physicality or learn how to navigate big guys, or to what you said earlier, you learn not to shoot it. You learn that you can't finish over whatever big is there, and you pass to your open teammate in the corner. So now your field goal percentages naturally get better and your assists go up. And that's a decision-making process that it's a little bit understandable that maybe he doesn't see it yet because he spent a lot of his life being able to go in there and make those finishes.
Yep, totally. He's no longer the strongest dude in the yard anymore, like he was when he was younger.
Yep.
I still think he's skilled enough and creative enough as a playmaker to where he's going to be a great player. I'm not, he's still so young. I think he might be the youngest guy on our list, if I remember correctly. I think he's like maybe like a month or two younger than Victor, if I remember correctly.
Reed? Is he younger than
yeah,
Reed?
I think he might be younger than Reed too, in all honesty. They're very close in terms of age, if I remember correctly. So look,
Scoot will turn 21 in February. Reed will turn 21 in June.
Okay. So
Scoot's
Reed is slightly younger.
Yeah.
Okay. So second or third youngest guy on the list. And that does matter. Like, it's going to take these guys a little bit of time. The rookies, you can't just take automatically like what a guy looks like as a rookie. He's trying to adjust to the game and assume that's what it's going to look like the rest of his career. And by the way, we can now transition to another rookie on our list. At number 16, we have Amen Thompson. Amen Thompson was probably the player that I struggled with ranking most on this thing. He is one of the best athletes in the NBA. I would say he is one of the 5 best athletes in the NBA. I would put him in a class with Anthony Edwards, Ja Morant. I don't even know who else, really. He's that level of athletic. And it translated when you watched him on the court. He was sick this year in terms of utilizing his athleticism and imprinting that on the game. The way that Houston used him occasionally is like a backup point guard, but a lot more time like on the wing, even at times in the front court, like late in the season when Alperen Sengun went down, he played like some 4 and some 5. He's he's unbelievable to me in terms of his overall flexibility, versatility. That's the difference between him and like Nassir as an athlete to me. His flexibility is just like a totally different thing to me. The way that he can like get in and out of like cracks and crevices, the twitchiness is just like a different level to me, especially in the open court where he can really make plays. I think that his passing, his feel, his overall like IQ for how to play with the ball in his hands, especially in the open court, is unbelievable. I don't even know what to call him yet positionally. Sure. You could convince me that he is still a point guard. I think that's like a reasonable assessment if you want to say that. You could convince me that he is more of a wing in like the Andre Iguodala mold and like an even better like athlete than what Andre Iguodala was. And if people watched Iguodala when he was young, Iguodala was an incredible athlete. And I think that Amen is an even better athlete than that. His passing is incredible. But the biggest thing for me when I watch Amen Thompson is the motor.
Sure.
He never stops going at 1,000 miles an hour. And that is where, to me, it's a little bit more, he's almost like if you combined Russell Westbrook and Andre Iguodala, which is like a weird combination of players. And I don't know exactly what that turns into, but like you watch his aggressiveness on the offensive glass, you watch his aggressiveness on the defensive glass, you watch the way he pushes tempo, you watch the way that he's very comfortable, for instance, in the clip that we're watching right now, playing as a screener and rolling to the rim. Yep. Like he just does every single little thing on the court. And then he's flexible, dynamic. He can spin in transition. He can keep control of the ball. I think Amen Thompson's ceiling is as high as all but like maybe 3 or 4 guys on this list if things really break right, but things would have to break right in terms of the shooting. And that's where I'm quite low on Amen Thompson. But if the shooting in any way gets figured out, like the growth trajectory for him will be exponential as the shooting improves. Like any shooting improvement will result in exponential growth for Amen Thompson moving forward. What do you think of Amen?
Nah, he was, listen, I was pretty high on Amen. I ended up with him 4 and, pretty solidly there in that class. And I remember watching OTE and just thinking like, man, this kid is really good. And I had a pretty good gap between him and Nassir. And obviously I've watched a lot of Nassir's rookie year, all of Nassir's rookie year. And I argued with a lot of people that I thought Amen was just as good a defender. Everybody kind of talked about Nassir being good defensively, and I felt like Amen didn't get the love.
Hot take, Bryce. I think he's better.
No, I know that's my point. I thought he was better coming out. Like I would say I didn't think there was that big of a gap on the defensive end. It seemed like everybody thought that Nassir was, but Amen, man, like here's where he's scary too. He's a rebounder. And then he can do true grab and go. Like I think we overuse grab and go sometimes. Somebody will grab a rebound, dribble it across half court, and then pass to a point guard. I'm like, that's not grabbing and going. That's just dribbling the ball up the floor. Grabbing and going is being able to break down the defensive rebound at a high level and then pressuring the defense without an outlet pass. And Amen Thompson can really do that. His Euro step in transition is impossible to stay in front of. And he's just a blur in general. But what I liked is he had times where he could have really forced the issue and didn't. I love seeing that process from him. I love his feel and knack with his off-ball cutting. You mentioned the fun things you can do with him as a screen and roll guy because of his athleticism, but also his decision-making. He's a nightmare on the offensive boards. He makes quick decisions. It's just, you can kind of play him in so many different roles. And then the defense, Sam, the defense and the defensive playmaking. So I went back and looked, and this didn't hold true for the whole season, but at one point he was averaging 4.5 stocks per 100. And like SGA was right over 4 this year. Derek White had a season around 4, like just insane. And his off-ball instincts are really good. I mentioned the cutting, the offensive rebounding on the defensive end, tracking block shots, defensive rebounding. It's just, I don't know, like if a coach is able to be creative with him and use him in nuanced ways and all of that, even if the shot doesn't come around, there's a really fun player in there. And as you mentioned, if the shot does come around in any capacity, forget about it. Like, good luck trying to stay in front and guard this guy.
And here's the big thing with his shot as well. I think he is such a special athlete that he is the kind of player, and is so skilled with the ball as well. That's important here. He is the kind of player that can overcome not being able to shoot and still be an awesome, incredible, like winning basketball player, because his motor is so high. His instincts as a cutter are so good. You have to play up on him. Like, realistically, like, unless he is spacing from the corner, you kind of have to play up on him, because if you give him any space, he is going to take it and is going to get downhill. And he is such an explosive player. He gets downhill in an absolute instant. It is instantaneous in terms of when you feel that downhill pressure coming at you immediately. Man, I think he is so special as a overall player that will help you win games. I think the Rockets just like nailed this. Just absolutely nailed this at number 4. And he was the obvious pick if Cam Whitmore's, medical wasn't clear in some way, shape, or form. Obviously they felt comfortable with the medical given that they took Cam Whitmore, but I ended up with, Brandon Miller, Cam Whitmore, and Amen Thompson all in the same tier, and they all look absolutely spectacular. The thing that makes Amen fun to me, though, is I can see a world where he is the second best player on a title team.
Sure.
I can see a world where his game scales down so well, even in spite of the lack of shooting, that he's like the third or fourth best player on a title team very easily.
We did this with the Aaron Gordon conversation, right? Like, this isn't, we're not trying to say this is what he ends up being. And obviously that's still a really good player, but we talked about
that's what makes this conversation so hard. I have no idea what exactly Amen Thompson is going to be, but I know that he's going to be a winner.
Yeah. Yeah. And the intel on these, both of them, quite on, is good. Like, they're workers. They want a ball. All they care about is basketball. I have a hard time completely betting against somebody so athletic, not figuring out the jumper a little bit. I will say, like, one thing that Asar figured out this year that I didn't watch enough of him in, maybe he did it occasionally. Asar got really good at like this 8 to 10 foot, just jump higher than everybody else, mid-range jumper type thing. And that was enough that, like, he could just, like you're talking about with the men, he drives in across the lane. If you want to play off, and then he's just going to jump higher than you. You're not going to block the shot. And so even if he can hit that, like just a little mid-range pull up and make you pay, that's going to make you guard him a little bit differently if he can figure that out. Just looking at the raw mid-range numbers, it doesn't look like maybe he was able to figure that out just yet, but it doesn't have to be like the entire 3-point package either. Like, you just got to be able to make some stuff to keep a defense honest. And then again, he becomes even more dangerous. But the transition, the versatility, the playmaking, the quick decision-making, play him in the dunker, short roll him, all of those things. I just think it'd be fun to use a player like that. And I think it can be really effective if done right.
Yeah, I think so too. He's like kind of the ultimate chess piece player, where like you're going to be able to use him in 45 different ways. Like, he's the queen on the chessboard to me, right?
Yeah.
Where he can go any direction. He can play any position. He can, move as many pieces up the board as he wants because he's so good in transition, right? If he develops a jumper, let's live fancifully for a second, right?
Okay. Sure.
If he develops if he gets to the point where he is 35% on wide open catch and shoot threes and develops like a very consistent jump stop floater, which I think like that's coming. That I think is like a real thing for him. He will actually develop that. He is pretty close to that already, in my opinion. If he develops the 35-foot or the 35% wide open catch and shoot three, a little jump stop floater in the mid range, and doesn't really ever become like a pull-up shooter, but like gets to the point where Russ got to as a pull-up shooter, just maybe with, less egregious shot selection at times than what Russ had.
Sure.
What is Amen Thompson's ceiling?
I would have him in probably third on the list.
I think I would also have him third or fourth on the list. I think he's an all NBA player if any of that happens.
Yeah, I don't know that
all NBA player if that happens.
Yeah, because do we both believe he has all defensive team upside on that end? Yeah,
I think he might make all defense this year if he would play enough minutes. Look, I don't know what their rotation is going to look like. I don't know what any of Houston's situation is going to look like because they have to figure things out, right? If he would play 2,000 minutes this year, and he might do that, I don't know. I think he has a chance to make all defense this season.
Yeah, he's good. He's really good.
He's awesome. He's an incredible basketball player to me. It's just that he is at number 16 here because you and I are that low, unfortunately, on the jumper.
Sure.
And its probability of coming through. If it was to come through, man, he's something special to me.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, so obviously, Alperen Sengun is on this list. I wonder if we fucked up putting Amen below Alperen, but we'll talk about him in a minute here as people know that saw the thumbnail. Number 15 on the list, Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley is a 6'11", 4-5 hybrid, let's call him. He's already averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds. He's already one of the 3 or 4 best defenders in the NBA when he's on the court. He's been a positive player in terms of EPM all 3 seasons that he's been in the NBA, largely because of that defensive impact. Let's start here. I think he is probably one of the 2 best, maybe 3 best help defenders in the NBA right now. I think his instincts in terms of flying around and just like covering for his teammates whenever, somebody gets beat off the bounce or he has to make like a crazy scramble situation rotation. I think he is so good at that I would say he's already one of the 3 or so best in the league. Where do you kind of fall on that?
What, AD, Jaren?
Yeah. AD and Jaren were the 2 I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to go through rosters. Those were the 2 names off the top of my head.
Yeah. Those were the 2 that immediately came to my mind when I thought about it. But that's the class that Evan is in on defense.
Sure. Yeah.
He is a staggering player. And oh, by the way, really sharp rim protector. Really, really sharp as a switchable defender. Like the Cavs will switch him fairly regularly, right? Like, especially when he's playing the 4 next to Jared Allen, like we're looking at it on screen right now. Like, they switch him on to Jaylen Brown. Jaylen gets him with a hesitation. He ends up recovering for a, blocked shot on the drive. He is a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic defender across the board. What is the offense is really the question here. And that's the ceiling for Evan Mobley on a list like this is quite high. If the offense and the ball handling and the shooting ever come along. But my concern with that is we just haven't really seen any growth there yet. That's my main worry. Like we haven't seen him take an enormous leap forward there. I felt like his improvement from 2-point range this season was a lot more due to, they like found him as a roller a little bit more often, right? Like he played in ball screens a bit more often than, was early on. Like he was in the dunker spot and they'd hit him like in the spot up or like in the mid post and he'd drive and would take like a little floater or take like mid-range jumpers. I thought his shot selection was a little bit better this year. I don't know if like the skill set showed like a ton of growth this year either.
Yeah. And there were times where I would watch and I didn't see the confidence and aggressiveness even that I wanted to see from him, or he would come out and listen, I can hear people screaming at me, whenever you have the guy we mentioned earlier, Garland and Donovan Mitchell, but maybe all those opportunities aren't always there. Like, I get it. I understand it, but he should definitely be the third offensive option in terms of scoring when he's on the floor. And those two, I don't know what the minutes are, but I assume he played some minutes where it was just one of those two on the floor with him. I know they had to play some big stretches this year, but I just found myself wanting him to stay more confident, more aggressive throughout the game. I think he's a decent passer. His assist numbers went up a little bit this year, but field goal attempts.
That actually might be the area where he showed growth.
Yeah,
I think the passing got better this year. That's a good point, Bryce.
I had quite a few notes about, made some nice reads and all of that, but the field goal attempts actually went down. The 3-point attempts actually went down. The free throw attempts actually went down. That's not the trajectory. I'm not saying it had to balloon some crazy jump, but I would have liked to see a little bit more. And I think some of it was just confidence, aggressiveness, and just kind of his mentality on that end. There's nothing wrong with what he is defensively and how impressive and how impactful he is. But to have him higher on this list after 3 years, I guess, I would have liked to see a little bit more to have a belief that he's the second option on this team at some point offensively. And I don't know that I've seen enough to believe that. He may be the second best overall player because of the defense. I don't know that he's the second option offensively. Like, I just feel like there's a little bit of a limitation right there, a little bit because of the skill set. I just feel like there's a little bit of the mentality as well for him.
It is interesting trying to figure out, like, is it mentality? Is it spacing? Is it that, like, in his second season, they went out and acquired Donovan Mitchell, so there are just naturally fewer on-ball reps than what were, could be available for a different player in a different kind of situation, right?
Sure.
Trying to kind of run through that is hard. There's a lot of contextual factors that I think go along with that. The thing that I see when I watch Mobley is that it is just really hard for him to, like, move anybody. On offense. I think he absorbs contact really well on the defensive end and is capable of, like, holding his ground. But there's a difference between, like, being able to, like, stay steady and, like, hold your ground once you have the position and actually gain the position.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And like gain that ability to get to your spot. And I think that he doesn't often do that well enough is kind of where I sit on it. And I worry, okay, if we think he just has this, like, naturally pretty thin frame, right? Which I think is pretty reasonable. Like, Anthony Davis has always been the hope for him. Anthony Davis has always had, like, wider, massive shoulders.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that allowed him in his frame to, like, really fill out in a way that made sense. Mobley has, like, those kind of, like, slighter shoulders, let's say, comparatively. And I wonder if it might be a little bit harder for him to put on weight that allows him to maintain what makes him so special in terms of his mobility. Like, I'm sure he could add weight and get up to 240 pounds. Anybody can get fat. Like, as you get older, you know that, right? Like, you can put on weight with ease. But the key is maintaining that ability to move and to be flexible and to have the lateral ability that he has that makes him so special on defense. And I'm not saying he can't do it. Like, he might be able to do it. It is just, like, a little bit concerning that he's 23 years old and we haven't seen it quite yet at this point.
Yeah, no, that's my holdup here, not having him any higher. And maybe it will take the Cavs forcing his hand or him feeling like he's in that role if the moves ever do happen, or who knows, maybe we will see, a new coach come in Kenny Atkinson and he'll unlock it. Right. I mean, this is totally why you bring Kenny Atkinson to Cleveland, is you believe between Allen and Mobley, your defense is going to stay steady enough and Atkinson's going to unlock something new. I don't know that it's with Mitchell. I thought Allen made some really interesting strides anyway. It would be the combination of that backcourt. And I think the biggest thing can he unlock something in Mobley that JB and staff just weren't, quite able to?
Yeah. And look, like, even if that doesn't happen, right? Like, even if we end up in a circumstance where Evan Mobley is what he is now, or like is, 15% better than what he is now, as opposed to like getting drastically better than what he is now. And that ceiling still exists 100%. Even if he is that, he's still one of the 3 best defenders overall in the league in his prime. He's already, been top 3 in defensive player of the year. If he is as good a bet as anybody outside of Victor Wembanyama to be defensive player of the year next year, right?
Sure.
Like him, Jaren Jackson, Bam Adebayo, Anthony Davis, and Victor Wembanyama. Like, those are the 5. If you're picking defensive player of the year, I'd imagine, I haven't looked at the betting odds. I would imagine those are the top 5 in betting odds right now. He's already great on that end. He's already a great basketball player. No matter what he does moving forward, he's going to be great for the next like 5-6 years, for as long as the athleticism holds up. To get higher on this list, I think that he needs to continue to showcase very real improvement as a ball handler, and needs to be able to shoot. We saw some of the flashes of the shooting in the playoffs at times. He looked a little bit more comfortable. But if he doesn't do that, it then becomes a little bit more complicated in terms of roster building around him. Because if he doesn't get super, super strong, if the frame is kind of what we think it is, he might be a little bit better off at the 4, which means you have to find like a spacing 5. And those guys are just, as we've talked about throughout this summer, really, really hard to find.
Yeah.
So might just be like a little bit of a trickier roster fit for Evan Mobley than it is also for some of the guys above him.
And I think that's where my ranking ultimately, and maybe this is unfair to Evan, is I'm not projecting that offensive role to grow. And so I kind of settled into this spot because that's, I guess my projection is that it's not going to get to the level we're kind of discussing and what we would like to see. So I settled into this, 15. I think I had him ranked at 16 on my personal, board or whatever. So this was right in the same range. I don't know that either of us varied a whole heck of a lot on most of these guys when we, a few spots here and there, but for the most part, it was pretty close.
There were a few we had like a pretty drastic difference on, but I was right around like 15 for Mobley.
Yep.
Okay. Number 14, Alperen Sengun. I think there's like a very real case that we could flip-flop these 2 guys, Mobley and Sengun, for sure. I ended up with Sengun slightly higher. I believe you also ended up with Sengun slightly higher.
Yep.
To me, this is just one of the best offensive hub bigs that we see in the league. Averaged 21 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists last season.
So pretty good numbers, Sam. Those are pretty good numbers.
Those are pretty good numbers, Bryce. Those are pretty good. But it's the way that he does it that I think is so impressive, right? Like, he can, if he gets a mismatch on the block, he can take that guy on the block and just absolutely hammer him and go to town, right? Out on the perimeter, like, can run all sorts of fun, like dribble handoffs into rescreens, into resets, into, drives to the rim. He can pass on the move. He's an excellent live dribble passer. He's unbelievably creative with the ball in his hands. I think just his basketball mind is slightly at a different level, frankly, than like what Mobley's is on offense, for instance, right? And like Alperen Sengun's basketball mind is at a different level than like most players in the NBA, just point blank, right? Like, honestly, the clips you're going to see on the screen are just the passes from Sengun. His passing ability is incredible to me. And I love watching him just like think through spacing on the court as well. That's why I don't think he needs to like shoot threes. That's actually not the thing I'm most worried about with Sengun as a scorer. I don't think he needs to necessarily shoot threes because he's so smart from a spacing perspective. Now, it would help Houston a lot if he could shoot threes because they've drafted some non-spacers, but the way that he thinks through screening and using his frame and getting away from his man, sinking into empty spaces, I think he's just really smart at that stuff. And that's what makes him valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a really good screener. He is so much better in the pick and roll than what I thought for someone who isn't super twitchy or explosive vertically. He has the kind of unique little floater that he shoots. He's able to do it with both hands, real crafty in that area. I went back and was looking at my notes from the game he played against Wimby early March. He dropped 45 and 16 with 5 steals and a block in this game, Sam, and was just incredible. And the first 2 times he tried to attack Wembanyama, he missed. But then he figured it out. He went a little more finesse and he used some more nuance in his footwork. And he has that full bag of all of those different things. And so that was what was impressive. And then I know we'll probably dive into the defense even more, but I think he'll get better and better in almost a Jokic sort of way, just knowing where his hands need to be in a ball screen coverage and getting him in the pocket passing window to get a deflection, get a steal. And so that way he doesn't have to rely on his lack of vertical pop and the lob pass going over his head, just understanding how he can play that cat and mouse game, play angles, passing lanes. He's going to get beat in some of those situations. It's just the nature of the beast. But I just think he's really skilled. And I think when I started out, I had him a little bit lower. And then I went back and read my notes and I looked at the numbers and I'm just like, I'm undervaluing him right now. I'm undervaluing him. It's a lot more fun to talk about, the athleticism. And so often we talk about athleticism and ceiling in the same breath. And I think, I hope you and I are pretty nuanced at not doing that, but it's easy to fall in love with those things and lower the ceiling of the guys who maybe aren't as athletic. So I felt pretty good about where we ended up with him, where I had with him, because he's been really, really good.
He is, borderline, like pretty close to being an all-star as it is. Now, like I made the case at the time and will continue to make the case. And I think Rockets fans figured that out throughout the year, that if the Rockets were going to have an all-star last year, it needed to be Fred VanVleet. I thought Fred VanVleet was their best player all year. And I know that, like, statistically, you look at the 21-9-5 and you will see Sengun's numbers look better. I thought Fred was their best player last year, just kind of point blank. But the thing that I'm most worried about with Alperen is if he is not going to shoot, he needs to be like a punishing finisher around the basket.
Yeah.
And right now, he's probably a below average finisher for a big around the basket. It's like an average finisher league wide, but like a below average finisher for a guy that's 6'10 and a half, 240 pounds, whatever he is, looking at the screen, 235 pounds, and is like as physical as he is. Like, he plays a physical brand of basketball. He has like that lower center of gravity and can just kind of move guys around, right? Made 62.5% of his shots at the rim last year. Among bigs, the guys that he's kind of close to in that regard are Nikola Vucevic. Let's see here. Paul Reed, according to Synergy, is like right in this ballpark. Day'Ron Sharpe is right in this ballpark. Julius Randle is kind of in this ballpark, right? And that's, I will say, like, the name Julius Randle, like, does come to mind a little bit for me when I watch Sengun. I think that there are some similarities there. I think Sengun is more inherently creative than what Julius is. I think Julius is like more of a slasher driver, and they played like different styles of basketball, right? Like, they're not stylistically similar in how they play the game, but in terms of like what their role is on a court, in terms of what you're asking them to do, and Julius Randle is a multiple time all NBA player. So if Alperen is that, like, this is an enormous win for Alperen, right? Maybe not an enormous win, but like it's a very plausible outcome that I think would be a good outcome for him. But I wonder how easy it is to build a winning roster around that if the defense doesn't showcase real improvement. I think that Houston fans often try to, like, I don't want to say excuse Alperen's defense, but like make a case for it being good. And I will say that I think he got better this year on defense. I think that his positioning in ball screens like got drastically better. That's the biggest thing for me. He's always had like pretty good hands and has always had good hand-eye coordination. He's always been able to get deflections and make plays like that. But I still don't think he is a impactful defender when I watch him.
Sure.
Like there is a real difference between him and Nikola Jokic when I watch those two. Like Jokic just feels a little bit longer. He feels a little bit stronger. He feels like he takes up more space, feels like his feet are actually a little bit quicker in recovery. I'm not saying Alperen can't get to that kind of level, but I do think he is demonstrably a bit lower than that level whenever I watch him play. And I think that he needs to continue to showcase improvement, because otherwise we're then talking about like a non-shooting, non-defensive big. And as we know in today's NBA, it's really hard to win at the highest levels when that guy is one of your best players, which with this ranking, we're kind of saying that we think he can be. So that's why he didn't end up higher, despite the fact that he's 22 years old and it averaged 21, 9, and 5 last year. I just think I still have questions on his game winning at the highest levels in a ways that like I don't on some other guys. And honestly, if we were re-ranking this list, I would have him. In fact, I actually think I did have him higher than the guy we have coming next on the list. And we'll talk about that. That's its own can of worms. But he needs to be able to protect the rim, play in space a little bit better, and like actually make an impact. Like I felt like he got lost in no man's land when he was younger, like way more often, like the first 2 years. I thought he got lost less often in no man's land in ball screens this year, but it did still feel like there was a lack of disruption from him in those kind of actions.
Well, the next guy on the list is the one I'm least confident in, so I'm not excited about that conversation because I didn't know what to do with him. So just to continue to foreshadow that or tease that or whatever the term is. Yeah, I mean, the thing with Sengun on the defensive end, Sam, he might be in a pretty good position just to be neutral, though, with what the rest of that roster may have. I mean, we talked about Jabari Smith Jr. last episode and what he could be defensively. We just raved about Amen Thompson and what he is defensively. Tari Eason and what he could be defensively for this team. Reed Shepherd, not necessarily on the ball, but off the ball. So my point is, and again, I weighted this stuff whenever I did my rankings in terms of I think the Rockets are very much on the rise, and Sengun maybe not being a plus defender, maybe capping out at neutral on this Rockets team isn't the same as maybe some other teams who don't have those wing and perimeter defenders that team does. And then what he does offensively. And one thing I'll throw at you, just curiosity, I agree with you that the rim finishing isn't maybe what you would want from a big. Does his finishing from 3 to 10 feet, which he's done at almost 50% the last 2 seasons on pretty good volume, and 10 to 16 feet, which he's done at almost 50% the last 2 seasons, does that make up for it in any way? The fact that his touch is so good in that next level that it makes it like, okay, maybe he's not going to go and hammer one home or draw a foul. Maybe that's the negative side of this, but he can still score the ball pretty efficiently in a lot of those play types because he has such good touch a little further from the basket.
I think, yes, I think that has potential to really, continue to improve, but it's like different to me. They're different skill sets, right? Like Alperen is not particularly vertical.
Sure.
Which means like around the basket when he is being contested by another guy who's like just as big as he is, if not longer, a lot of the time, maybe not bigger, but longer. I think that he can struggle to go kind of through that guy. But if he gets a little bit of space, a little bit of separation, I think his touch is actually pretty good around like in that area. So to answer your question, like, I think he would need to be like Nikola Jokic level as a finisher. And I don't think he has that level of touch.
Sure.
I just don't. Like
very, very few do, Sam. Very few do.
Nikola Jokic, like in terms of like around the basket and like even like extended it out to 3, right? Like that's just like a different That's like all-time level touch. That's not, hey, this guy has great touch around the rim, which I think Alperen absolutely does, and I think deserves an immense amount of credit for continuing to improve and grow in that way. But to me, they're just like different skill sets. And also, again, like I feel like Jokic's release point is a little bit higher around the basket in those areas. He takes those shots from like fucking behind his head, it feels like a lot of the time. And that leads to like fewer contests around the rim, or like less contested shots, let's say, around the basket. So it's he's an interesting player in that way. Trying to figure out what he can be as a scorer is fascinating. Like he is, to me, he's like kind of already ahead. Like I don't even know if he's ahead of Sabonis as a scorer, but like there's
Probably right.
kind of a lot that he does like as a scorer.
Yeah,
like driving the ball and like being creative. Like I feel like Sabonis is more of like a post hub, whereas like he's like a dribble handoff driver and like is able to do like a lot of different. He's such a fascinating player, Alperen. Like I love him. I do. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly it is. The last thing I'll note here on Sengun though is with the Rockets, right? The Rockets have 7 guys on this list, basically
7.
from number
repeat that 7,
14 to 40, right? 14 to 38, 37, wherever we had. I think Tari was the guy we probably had lowest, but like we still love Tari Eason and we think he's like an unbelievable player. They have 7 of those guys from 14 to 35 to 40, right? They don't have anybody in the top 13 here.
This is what we've been saying about. Yes.
I don't know that they have. I say that to say I don't know that they have the number 1 guy right now.
Agreed.
And how they go about acquiring that guy, either via development of Alperen, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd, or a trade for, whoever comes available. I don't want to name names. That's going to be the most interesting part of their build now moving forward. They've done I don't think it's easy to accumulate this much talent. It's not. Their front office has done an unbelievable job of scouting and evaluating and finding guys that are awesome at basketball. I think they don't get enough credit for how well they've done doing those things. The job does get hard now because you have to find the number 1 guy if you're going to compete for a title. They have more trade chips than anybody in the league probably to be able to go get that guy. But they now have to find him. And it could be on their team. It might not be. But in my opinion, the odds is that it's probably not on their team currently.
I think I agree.
So that's kind of where we sit on the Rockets. And we love Houston. We love this team. We love this group. It's no secret there, I think. Okay. Number 13. LaMelo Ball. I have no fucking idea where to rank LaMelo Ball.
I don't want to.
No idea. I have no idea where to put LaMelo Ball on a list like this. I defaulted a good amount lower than this, I feel like, on mine.
Did you? So yeah. I'm actually the one.
By like a good amount, I mean like a few slots lower than this even. You were the one that had him a little bit higher than I did. So if you're looking for somebody to yell at for LaMelo Ball, having already made an all-star game and everything, and he's sitting here at number 13, I'm your guy. 23.9 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists last year, 1.8 steals. Shot 43, 36, 87 from the field. His career true shooting percentage is 4% below league average. Truly, when you watch LaMelo, he is one of the most dynamic, creative players that you will find in the league.
Yep.
I would say he has a unique, special basketball mind in terms of creativity. And yet he is so wild with his decision-making, shot selection, everything there on offense. And then the defense, we'll talk about the defense in a minute, but like he is so wild that it's hard to know where exactly it settles. The reason I had him much lower on this, and by much lower, I mean, I think I had him like 16 or so. I had him below Alperen and Mobley, I believe. Might have even, I might have had him below Amen on my final list, but I'm not 100% sure. The real reason is injuries. LaMelo has not been able to stay healthy yet in his career, right? He's had like one season where he's been able to stay remotely healthy. He played 75 games in his second season, played 51 in his first season. He played 36 last year and played 22 in 2023-24. He's missed over 100 games the last 2 years. It is hard, I think, to count on that right now and to count on him being on the court. Outstanding talent and creativity. To me, it was just hard to count on him being on the court.
Yeah. Looking at those numbers now, I mean, obviously I looked in, but I don't think I took that into enough account when then you also factor in how bad the defense is and then the efficiency. So I actually think people should probably be yelling at me for having him too high and bumping him up. Although it's still a guy that's averaged in the games he's played over 20 points a game the last 3 seasons, even on that efficiency. He's a high volume 3-point taker and maker, free throw percentage, 8 assists a game. Again, the defense is so bad. He makes some ridiculous. I just didn't know. Like straight up.
Let's talk
this
about
was
the
my
offense
heart.
first, before
this was my hardest one,
yeah.
Sam. I didn't know, because the talent is real. He makes ridiculous shots. The passing can be really impressive at times. He can really touch the paint at times, get others involved. I couldn't figure it out. And based on how high we have Brandon Miller, I can't even defend that he's going to be the primary guy on that team, because I don't think that's going to be the case in 2 years from now. So yeah, I just wasn't sure. He's too talented. He's put up too big of numbers, I guess, for me to feel comfortable having him a whole lot lower than what I had him, I guess.
Yeah. I really appreciate the talent that he has, is why I think this is like a fine place to put LaMelo. He is incredibly gifted.
Yeah.
As a basketball player. Like the ability to get to step backs, the ability to get to spots on the court, the ability to drive and finish at the basket on some level. The overall touch that you mentioned, being able to be a high volume 3-point shooter. The passing is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like the way that he thinks through things on the court a lot of the time as a passer and decision maker and playmaker, the way he sees the court is it's like unbelievable. And he's pretty generally, I would argue, on target with his passes as well. I think he does a great job of manipulating defenders with his eyes. I think the way that he kind of moves players just by looking in different directions on the court is remarkable to me. I also just don't trust him when he's on the court.
Sure.
And this is where we can talk about the decision making. Like he makes some of the craziest decisions on the court I've seen in a while from a talented player. And like you could say that that's going to improve, right? Like he's young and he's immature and things like that, but man, like some of the choices are just crazy to me. Some of them are just like absolutely insane. And I don't think you can win with some of those choices in terms of shot selection and in terms of passing and playmaking. Like, I don't think that you can. Yeah, I just don't think you can be consistent as an organization with that. And again, this is before we get to the defense.
So that's what I was going to say is I think that's where it gets really tough is, do you think somebody with kind of the process he has right now in terms of willingness to make those decisions and the wild passes and some of the shot attempts along with the defense, is that something that ever translates to winning at a high level, regular season or postseason? And I think that's where it's hard.
At his current style of play, no, I think it doesn't. He is young. He's still 23 years old. There are adjustments that can and will be made, as we've talked about with a number of these players, right? But as of right now, I don't really trust it
Yeah.
at that level. And this is where we can talk about the defense. LaMelo is the worst defender on this list.
Yeah.
Point blank. He is so aggressively bad in terms of caring about what's happening on the weak side when he's there. Frankly, in terms of efforts, second efforts, getting around screens, being willing to just like kind of fight. He is just really, really poor on that end in a way that has to get better if they're going to win. If they are going to win in any way, shape, or form, he has to get better on that end. He can't be as inattentive and frankly, like uncaring is what we've seen a lot of the time from him. If they're going to be a consistent, like winning team with him and Brandon Miller.
Yeah. No, it was bad is just the word. And there's some some guys above him that we'll definitely talk about, not even on this episode, on our final episode when we get into the top 9 that aren't great defenders, that they're probably where they're at, like not a few spots higher because of the defense. But I don't think I would say they're this bad. And I think you bring up how, where he just doesn't seem focused in and all of that. Like that's truly what it is. So it's an issue. It's a real issue. And like I said, that combined with the injuries, combined with the inefficiency, decision-making, I feel bad because obviously we like some things about him where he wouldn't have been ranked at this spot on the average between you and I.
Incredibly talented player.
I think what we're trying to
talented player.
justify here is why he can't be any higher. And even maybe why we struggled to even put him as high as we did and not feel great about it, I think is what it is for me. I put him where I did and I still struggled because of some of these things that hopefully will get better. Hopefully he will stay healthy. Hopefully he will care more on defense, and hopefully he will find efficiency. And especially now that he has a running mate like a Brandon Miller on his team.
Yeah. And a new coach, like hopefully
a new coach.
But like, look, Steve Clifford
Yeah.
isn't exactly easy to make happy on the defensive end. Let's go with. He demands a pretty high level of accountability on the defensive end. If he wasn't getting that from LaMelo, I'm a little bit skeptical on him getting it on LaMelo, like kind of being willing to do that from anybody. But hey, yeah. No, I had looking through my final list, which like I kind of shared with you, but kind of didn't. I ended up with LaMelo at I believe 16. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Charles Lee, as a first-year head coach, finally getting his chance, is able to do with him. So
yeah. Okay. Number 12, Franz Wagner. This is a player. I had one spot higher than this. No, 1 or 2. I can't remember. I had 1 or 2.
So this is, I believe, I had him a couple spots lower, to be transparent. Yeah. This is one of the first guys I had a little bit lower than where our ranking ended up. So
6'9" to 6'10" forward who can play make with the ball in his hands, can drive, slash to the rim, average 19.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, shot 48-28. We'll talk about that. 85 from the field. Career true shooting percentage is about league average. Big thing with Franz, advanced metrics, like adore him. The last 2 years, he's been over 10 wins in terms of how dunksandthrees.com and the EPM model values him. The reason for that, he is a great two-way player. He is awesome on offense and he is awesome on defense. Guards the ball well, switchable. More than anything, though, like always in the right position, great team defender. Constantly seems like he is disruptive in making things happen on that end. Offensively, dynamic as a slasher, dynamic in transition, great deceleration, very comfortable in ball screens. I love the way that he kind of, despite being 6'9", 6'10", is capable of like navigating through creases and little areas on the court as a driver.
Is he one of the more crafty finishers on his like drivers for someone his size? Like I just feel like he's so crafty with the Euro steps, plays off 2 feet, has footwork, has touch, can do it both hands, can take. He's so crafty and skilled with what he can do.
Plays off both 1 and 2 as well. As I think what's really, really impressive to me when I watch him, the way that he's capable of using that, slow step, be able to get to like a floater, using the slow step, being able to bump and then finish with his right or his left. He is really, I think crafty is the best way to put it. He's one of the craftiest finishers that you will find in the league. The passing is pretty real. I think that the way he sees the court is really high level. I think he's smart. I think that he's unselfish. He's constantly looking at the way that help defenders are coming at him. He just has this real innate sense of how to navigate defenders once he hits that painted area and then read what they're doing off of him. The big question with Franz now moving forward is the jumper.
Yep.
I don't know what to do with the jumper. If you look at his track record, I think that the way to put it is it's always just been streaky. It has always gone through like long spells of him being like a great like a really, really good shooter and then like a really poor shooter, right? So, his first 2 years in the league, he made 35% and 36% from 3. This year, he was at 28% from 3. You look at the Michigan years, he made 31 and 34% from 3. So like, if you look at the 5 years in America now that he's been there, he's had like 3 not great shooting years and 2 pretty good shooting years where we thought it was pretty real, right? The answer to this is I don't totally know what the shot is at this point. I thought it was on the positive trajectory going from 31 to 34 to 35 to 36. You could see the growth every single season. And he's never going to be a guy where the first option is, I'm going to fire from 3. That's just never, it's not who he is. He prefers to drive. But like, I would like to see him make 36, 37% on 5 3-point attempts per game. Like if he does that, he's an all-star like next year, I think, but I don't know if he's that.
Yeah. Just to finish off the finishing around the rim, we talked about Sengun, who 0 to 3 feet wasn't over 70% this year, according to B-Ball Reference, or last year. And Franz was 72, 73% the last couple of years. So like, that's just a comparison there of a guy that's a wing forward compared to a big, and just the numbers that Franz puts up as that. I think it comes off flat at times. Again, as I went back and just, reviewed things. And I think that can be streaky. You have to be really, really on point whenever you are shooting it that flat and it comes out flat like that. And then if your legs are a little bit tired, movement, those type of things affect it even more. And so that would be, that was one of the first things that stood out to me. But I know I've said it on here that judging shooting mechanics, analyzing shooting mechanics is probably my worst aspect of anything I do in this realm, but that was something that stood out to me. The other thing, and you kind of mentioned it, his off-ball cutting is awesome. He is so good as an off-ball cutter. One of the best cutters
in the league.
And what's interesting, now that they added another one in the draft, like they have, this offensive hub in Paolo, and then Franz is so good as an off-ball cutter, and Tristan Da Silva was probably the best in this past year's class as well. So it's really, really good. What I like, you see him being have a little wiggle there. He can take over the offense when Paolo goes out. And I think that's what kind of makes him special. We'll talk about a couple guys here in our top 12 or wherever we're at that maybe play second fiddle to the primary guy on their team, but I think we both believe have the ability to play with the ball in hand and be the primary guy when that guy goes out. And I think Franz has that.
I ended up with Franz at 10 on my personal list, which is firmly all-star territory.
Sure.
Like that's where I would expect all of the top 10 guys that end up on our list to be all-stars, both like potentially in the short term, but certainly in the long term. I think that's where Franz's future lies. He's going to be an all-star player.
I had Franz a little bit lower, but still in a similar tier of all-star level player.
Yep, that's right. Okay. Number 11.
I'm going to get cooked, just so you know.
Because this is you, which will come as no surprise. Number 11, Cade Cunningham. I did have Franz over Cade. That's okay. I think Cade's ceiling is higher. I'll say that. Like, let's start there. Purely in terms of ceiling, I think he has a higher ceiling than Franz Wagner. Cade averaged 22.7 points, 4.3 rebounds, 7.5 assists. Shot 45, 35, 87 from the field. That still was a true shooting percentage, 6% below league average, just because he takes a ton of mid-range shots. One of 7 players this year to average 22 points, 7 assists, and shoot 35% from 3. One of the smartest players on the ball that you'll find in the league. Just the creativity, the poise, the confidence, the comfort, the ability to operate at his own pace, right? Like, look, you watch every single game that Cade plays. I'm just going to give it to you and you can talk about it.
No, I was saying I'm going to get cooked because I think people are going to be mad that he's this low. Like, Pistons fans are going to be pissed that he's this low. Listen, I wanted to give Cade some love because I have watched every single second of Cade Cunningham, and I don't think he has been put in a position to really show how talented he can be. And he has gotten better. He dealt through injuries. And here's another thing I've talked about a couple times. The opportunity is there for Cade because he was going to be the guy. He is the guy in the Detroit Pistons organization. They finally, I think, put real floor spacing around him this offseason, and we will get to see how he can operate and perform with that. I believe in the jumper, so I think he's going to make shots at a high enough level to complement the rest of his game. He's continued to put on strength. I think you mentioned it, the passing and the cerebral and all of that. And I am going to be a little bit bullish on the fact that I think he can still be a neutral level, if not a little bit better defender. He has not been that up to this point in his career. I get it. There's been a lot on his plate, but I think he has the ability to be a somewhat two-way player. And so because of that, I see all NBA level possibilities being the best player and face of the franchise for a Pistons team that hopefully at some point isn't winning 20 games a year anymore.
So I agree with you. He has all NBA upside. I think that's all 1000% right. Would not stun me in any way if he ends up as an all NBA player. 2 things that could come up there. Where are you on the handle? We'll start in terms of getting to the spot before we talk about like what happens at the spot, right? Where are you on the handle in terms of him being able to consistently not kind of like it's a little bit loose, like he kind of loses.
Sure.
Do you think that's a function of the court being too cramped because they've had no spacing? Or do you think that's a function of his handle just being a bit too loose, or a combination?
Yeah, so I don't think Cade has the most creative, like he's not the most wiggle guy that you're going to watch. He did, especially early in his career, I feel like he struggled to handle bumps and he would just like lose the ball. Like he would get to a spot and take a bump and lose it. But I think it's practical enough to get where he needs to go. And I think he's been so adamant about having to force the issue. He dribbles himself into tough spots because he has no other option other than to try to do so. Because quite honestly, there haven't always been a whole lot of other guys to make plays or to keep the floor space to allow him. I think that's ultimately going to make him better though, Sam, because he's had to be forced to work in these tight areas. And when things open up, even by a foot or 2 feet, it should make things a little bit easier. So,
okay. Question number 2. What do you think of the finishing? Because he is largely a below rim finisher. Has some moments where he can get up and go off of 1, most of the time off of 2, but can go off of 1 and finish above the rim because he's so long, has that 7-foot wingspan. Do you think the finishing is a product of the lack of spacing, or do you think it's a product of him being a poor finisher?
No, I do not think that's a lack of spacing thing. I think that's an area where Cade has to get better. If you tell me I'm too high and he doesn't hit this threshold, I think it's ultimately because he doesn't figure out the finesse finishing. Cade has to be, honestly, a Franz Wagner type of finisher in terms of the way he does it, right? He's not going in there and exploding vertically over guys. He has to extend and soft touch high off the backboard. He has to use nuance. He has to, you know where else Cade has to be better? He has to get to the free throw line. Like that's the other thing. So I think those two things combined, he has to finish better at the rim and he has to get to the free throw line more. That's what I guess I will buy into him improving. And if it doesn't, then that ceiling lowers and he's probably not a primary guy, probably not an all NBA guy. He ends up as being a secondary guy and an all-star level player. And that's still okay, but not maybe warrants where I have him ranked and maybe even where our averages end up having him ranked.
Yeah. Cade was another one that I struggled with quite a bit. I think in terms of ceiling, the ceiling is, as high as just about anybody on this list outside of the top 2 or 3, right? Like, I think if it really goes right for Cade, it's jumbo initiator. It's, 25 points and 9 rebounds a game or 9 assists a game with 7 rebounds. And he's dominating the game on, like, I can see that ceiling. There are real chances that he can do that. The floor is way lower. Like his ceiling is way higher to me than the next guy on the list. And I think a lot of people would have that reversed, but like the way that he thinks the game, the way that he is capable of kind of controlling the game, that's kind of something we haven't talked about. People look at him as like almost an only on ball player because of how ball dominant he can be from time to time, right?
Yes.
I think that his pace of play and the way that he's able to control the game for somebody as young as he is actually a benefit, not a hindrance in a lot of ways. Yes, if he ends up not being a number 1, then there are probably some issues there.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
The scalability could be a question, I think. But I think he is a point guard. And I think his ability to dominate the ball and control the tempo of the game is not a bug. It's a actual positive thing.
And here's where my perspective is probably different than just about anybody else, because I've watched every second of Cade Cunningham play basketball in his NBA career. And I've seen what he's had to deal with. And there's other guys that have had the face of the franchise primary guy label on them from day one on this list, Sam. There are, right? Like, I'm not saying he's the only one that has had to do that, but that's been a lot for Cade to have to take on from day one with no other real secondary guy. Like Jaden Ivey didn't even sniff this list. We didn't even mention him last episode. And I think we're 2 of the higher people on Jaden Ivey.
Yeah.
But that's been
probably should have mentioned him, to be honest. But yeah.
I didn't want to be too much of a homer, so I just left it alone. But because of some of the stuff last year with Monty and all of that, Cade is going on 3 coaches in 4 years. Now it's a new front office, no floor spacing, no secondary guy, all of that stuff. I understand this is going to come off as making excuses. I get it. To me, it's just like what it is. It's the truth. This is the year. 12 months from now, if we haven't seen Cade really explode, he had a whole offseason to continue to grow his game, realistic floor spacing. Hopefully year 4, all of that. I think this could be a really big year for Cade. And if it's not, then this ends up being a little bit high. And that conversation of scalability in a different role does come into play, because to me, his ultimate value is on the ball and how he can, like you said, manage a game and operate a game from there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm fascinated to see it this year because they do have space, at least. Like Tobias Harris is there.
Tim Hardaway Jr.
There,
I mean, listen, I'm not saying they're going to win a bunch of games. I'm just saying you can put guys and rotations and lineups on the floor that you don't have to play Jalen Duren and Nassir Thompson together. That's what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to do that stuff anymore Fontecchio, Beasley, Hardaway Jr. has real gravity. Harris has real gravity. It opens some of these things up.
But Bryce, they might do that. They might play Asar and Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey together.
Go to the next one. No, they're not. Go to the next one.
I'm gonna laugh hysterically if Jaden Ivey or if Jalen Duren and Nassir Thompson are both starting.
No. It's been such a good episode. Why do you ruin everything?
Yeah, just throw Ron Holland out there too.
Stop. What are we doing here?
Okay, number 10, Scottie Barnes for the Toronto Raptors. I've come to love Scottie Barnes. I think he's an outstanding player, all-star already. 23 years old, 20 points, 8.2 rebounds, 6 assists, big time playmaking defensive numbers.
Yes. Yep.
We'll talk about the defense in general. I think it's a little bit less than what the playmaking numbers indicate, but that's fine. 47% from the field, 34% from three, 78% from the line. Career true shooting percentage, very similar ballpark to Cade, right? Where like 5% below league average. Cade was at 6% last year. I think Scottie was like right around maybe like 2 or 3 below league average, if I remember correctly. But has become like a real on-ball player, like can play some pseudo point, can like he and Emmanuel quickly will share the on-ball responsibilities this year for Toronto. Unbelievable in transition. I think his passing ability continues to go underrated. I think Scottie Barnes is an unbelievable passer. Just in terms of the quickness of decision making, the way he's another guy that you kind of brought up with Amen Thompson, ability to grab and go on the break, like serious grab and go ability, not just fake grab and go ability where you bring the ball up the court. Ability to get all the way to the rim, ability to pressure the defense in grab and go situations, but also the ability with his enormous hands to throw like real live dribble passes at a high level. Right. I think Scottie is fantastic. I think he's an outstanding player. And, I'm fascinated to see where it goes. My question with Scottie, as it always has been and always continues to be, is the jumper. It's just always been so wildly inconsistent throughout the course of his career. He has games where he is phenomenal as a shooter. Like he made 7 threes in a game earlier this year. Right. And then in the final 24 games of his season this year, so almost half of his season, he shot 24% from 3 this year. So it's just hit or miss. He's very streaky as a shooter, and that's better than what I thought he'd be coming in. But we're now 3 years into it being streaky when he was ahead of the curve, as a rookie, but hasn't. I thought he took strides early in the season last year, and then it just completely reverted to what it had been previously. And that's what I think makes the conversation around what Scottie's upside is very complicated.
Yeah, that's where I just don't know. For what it's worth, I had him in this same spot where we had him. I think I had him 10 on mine, and we ended up with 10 here.
I had him 11.
So. Yeah, the defense off the ball, especially. So he's a very demonstrative communicator defensively. Like I can hear him whenever I'm watching film, which is always fun to see. Sometimes you can like see guys pointing and you can see their mouths moving, but you don't always actually hear them. Like Scottie, you can hear. I think it was Orlando Magic's bench too, just to change subjects a little bit. You could hear one of their assistant coaches calling out actions and stuff. I always enjoy that. But anyway, his off-ball defense, like low man rim protector, I think that's where he provides the most value. Like I think that's where his defense is at its best, is off the ball, low man, kind of that roamer role. I think that's the best defending Scottie Barnes. Offensively, it's just very interesting. I don't know where to pinpoint him. I think he could be a good off the ball cutter. I think you can do some creative, he can play as the handler. He can play as the roller. He can play on ball. I just like, what does he ultimately settle into? I'm sure I made Raptors fans mad because, again, when we did the Aaron Gordon thing, I said that he would probably be the next Aaron Gordon because maybe he wasn't quite good enough to play on the ball and have all the wiggle and shake and everything necessary to do that, but would be just this high level kind of role player type-ish. I wasn't projecting that or predicting it. I was just saying I could see that being what ends up happening. can he be the offensive hub? Like, like you say, you have offensive hub skills there. Is that what he ends up being? In that category of, I just don't like, is the on-ball stuff that good? Are you there with it on the ball where he can be the sole primary guy?
Not the sole guy, but I think that not yet. He can't be the number one on a good team yet, but I'm a lot more bullish, I think, on him having that ceiling than what I thought I would be at this point. I never really expected it, but the big key for me is just the shooting and the scoring, right? Like, can he consistently score the basketball at a level that allows him to be that? Can he continue to grow as a shooter in a way that allows him to be that player? I think in terms of like getting to spots, in terms of passing, playmaking, decision-making, all of that is there. Like, I trust the handle enough to allow him with his athletic tools. I mean, like another guy that's like a pretty underrated athlete, honestly, probably league wide.
Yeah.
Just in terms of being like 6'7", 7'2" wingspan, 230 pounds, powerful, strong, physical. Like he can do all of that and get to the spots. Like he has so much of a greater margin for error on his handle because of the fact that he does have those physical advantages, right? So it really comes down to the shooting for me. Can he consistently make shots at a high level? Can he consistently make mid-range jumpers at a high level? Can he consistently make pull-up threes at a high level? We're into the area now where basically everybody except for, I would say, probably just one guy is like basically a primary guy that's left on our list, right? Can be a primary guy. We're projecting that he can be a primary guy and will be a primary guy. Right?
Yeah. Maybe
I'd say
two.
only maybe two, but I would say one in all honesty. That's why this is a little bit harder and probably like a touch lower than where you would expect a guy that's 23 years old, just made an all-star game at 22, made an all-star game in the Eastern Conference, but like whatever. Right. But to me, like, it is all about like, where does the pull-up jumper come from? Like, we talked a lot about, Scoot Henderson and like not being able to shoot, right? Scoot made a higher percentage of his pull-up mid-range jumpers this year and made a higher percentage of his pull-up three-point jumpers. Do you know what percent Scottie Barnes made on his pull-up threes this year?
I'm
turning the trivia tables on you, Bryce.
23%.
19%.
Wow.
Do you know what he made the year before? Pull-up jumpers from three.
27%.
19.6%. So basically he's been like the same guy as a shooter, off the bounce from three. Made a higher percentage of mid-range jumpers this year off the bounce, which is critical, went from 36 to 40%. But those are numbers still not good enough to actually be the primary guy, right? If you're going to have the ball in your hands all the time is like the primary pull-up option. So that's where my concern lies. I will say this, defensively, you mentioned like the free safety, like playmaker role.
Yeah.
I thought he was great in that role defensively this year.
Yep.
They shifted him toward that. Like, they used to use him a little bit more at the point of attack, used to use him like in a bit more of like a solid, defensive role. I didn't think he was great at that. Like, I actually think that he is less switchable than what people see when they just look at the frame.
Yeah.
Right. I think he is somebody that kind of has like higher hips and like kind of struggles to change direction as easily as, some of the really good defenders on the ball in the league. Right.
Yeah.
But his instincts and basketball IQ as a free safety this year were unbelievable. Like his playmaking, like see ball, go get ball, like, Ed Reed style, just finding the, turnover, the interceptions, the, rotating over and blocking a shot. That was all like he is really, really good at that stuff in terms of making defensive plays. I think sometimes the closeouts are a little bit heavy and result in blow-bys at times, but that's like being kind of nitpicky on some level on the defense. I think overall, because he is such a defensive playmaker in that free safety role that they have him in, I think he is a positive defender now. I honestly would have said coming into this year, I thought he was not a great defender in his second year.
No, that's why I said like the off-ball low man defender is the best. Scottie Barnes is the best Scottie Barnes defender, because I agree. I don't think trying to use him as the primary defender on all these different matchups is where he's best used. Like there's some matchups that make sense, right? But you don't want to just like go send him against, these small twitchy guards. He's not switchable in that way. And so I think because he is so engaged, because he is so demonstrative off the ball with the athleticism, like you said, that we probably don't mention enough, he just really fits well into that off ball kind of roamer role. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can be super, super impactful, right? I mean, we raved about Evan Mobley and him being in the top tier of those type of guys. I mean, is Scottie a tier, but one tier, but like he's definitely not in that tier, but one tier below that in a similar type of role, off ball defender, 2 tiers below that.
The closeout stuff and the, overall like within rotation team stuff is a little bit less good for me, but yeah, he's like right at the level, like below the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
I think.
Sure.
In terms of that, like he's a great help defender and he's a great defensive playmaker. He's like not like a, he's not an all defense guy.
Sure.
When I watch him.
Yeah.
Even though the playmaking numbers would suggest that.
Sure.
I think on a possession, like, 2.8, stocks per game, right? Let's say he averages another like 6, in total between stocks and deflections, he might be at like, 5 or 6 of those per game. That's still what, like 8 or 9% of the defensive possessions he plays in a single game. So he's solid overall on defense now, like in the role he plays, but I don't want to act like those are the only things he does. He doesn't. He's quite good, but I think the other defensive possessions are not quite as consistently high level as compared to the elite of the elite. Other guys that like disrupt just with their presence, kind of.
Yeah.
Look, like it comes down to the shooting. If Scottie Barnes is going to shoot, he's like an all NBA player.
Yeah.
Point blank. If he doesn't shoot, he is a really effective, awesome, like third player on a team that like probably will help that team win a title at some point. But that's the level we're at now. Like in this top 10 list, the NBA is like in incredible shape with the young guys that they have right now. For Scottie to be 10th on this thing is crazy. Scottie is awesome.
No, that's what I said. When I first started listing it, I was like, oh man, this is going to be way, way tougher than what I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of really talented players.
Totally agree. Okay, Bryce, do you have trivia today?
Oh, of course. I already have trivia for Sunday, Sam. Like
Love it.
I'm always going to be on top just in case there's a special episode. So we are continuing with our 3-point shooting and assist kind of trend right now. If you remember last episode, I asked about 3-point floor spacers who didn't average very many assists, and Sam somehow pulled out Sam Merrill and finished off the 6 names there. I also asked about guys who didn't shoot threes but averaged a lot of assists. Let's just go all positive. During the regular season, Sam Vecenie, 4 players averaged greater than 40% from 3, 5 3-point attempts a game, and 6 assists per game. Who were those 4?
So 40% from 3.
Yep. 5 3-point attempts. So a little bit of volume and 6 assists. 4 players.
Okay. I'm putting this up on the page so we have it. Okay.
That is all right. Greater than or equal to, just in case any of them are right on the number.
40% from 3, 5 3-point attempts per game, 6 assists. So, okay.
This list is amazing. It's so much fun.
I mean, the obvious one to me would be Steph is the first guess.
Steph did not average the assists, believe it or not.
Wow. How many years in a row did Steph do that before this year?
So Steph, his assist numbers aren't as impressive as you would think, Sam. So in reverse chronological order, 5.1 this season, 6'3", 6'3", 5'8", 6'6", 5'2", and then 6'1", 6'6". Like, so there was a 5-6 year stretch before that. But yeah.
So 5 or 6 years in a row, he did it before that and then didn't do it this year. My radar was right though, in terms of like the player here.
So he had 2 years where he did it, 1 year where going back to like 17, 18. You have to go like during the middle portion of his career where it was over 6. But
really? Okay.
Yeah. 6.4 for his career, to your point.
Yeah.
Picking the greatest shooter ever, who also is a pretty good passer, is not a bad guess.
So if I remember correctly, LeBron had like a monster shooting year this year.
There you go.
It was up over 40, right?
LeBron James, 41% from 3 on 5.1 attempts and 8.3 assists. Great pull.
Okay. Next. Oh, so Darius Garland didn't shoot 40 from 3 this year. I don't think Trey shot 40. 6 assists is a higher barrier.
Yeah. I was hoping that would at least wheedle. That would remove.
That's the terminology. Yes. The proper terminology there.
It would get rid of some of the names and help you out a little bit. At least you could focus on some guys who really create. That was a little bit too far. Guys that do average 6 assists create a little bit.
Okay. Jokic wasn't over 40 this year. I don't think Devin Booker was over 40 this year, was he? Yeah.
Devin Booker is not an answer. I will pull what exactly he was short on. I believe we talked about him making the
percentage.
Yeah, we know he made the assist because he was the one that was really close on the 22-7 one. 36% from 3 for Devin Booker this season.
Halliburton.
Hallie is not on here.
So he shot like, because he had the hamstring pull. That's right.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, obviously he averaged the assist, 36% from 3 for Hallie as well.
I don't think Maxey got to the 3-point number either.
Maxey is not on this list.
I think he was at 37 or 38 last year.
So Jesus. I will be, this is a tough list. It's fun. They are not outlier names.
It's a weird list.
It's a weird list. Like there's the names on here are like real dudes. So one dude averaged between 25 and 30 points a game. Another dude averaged between 20 and 25. And the fourth guy averaged just under 20. So like, these are real, they all average more than 30 minutes a game. They all played on teams that made the playoffs.
Is there a game limit?
Nope. It wasn't necessary. I didn't have to put it in there. I did those 3 qualifiers, and the least amount of games played is 59 for one of the players.
So the name I didn't think of last time was Dame. And it would be plausible for him to hit this, right?
It would be plausible. He did not. Must be the
Jesus.
Yeah, it's so
25 to 30 is high. So is Brunson on this list?
Jalen Brunson is one of the names on this list. So Brunson had a 40.1% 3-point shooting season, 6.8 attempts, 6.7 assists.
Okay. So that's the 25 to 30.
Yep. Dame average was 35% from 3.
So now we're into the maybe an all-star, maybe not an all-star. At 20 to 25.
That you described that player perfectly.
Okay. Maybe an all-star, maybe not an all-star.
I think you will guess this player. I don't think you'll get the last one without a hint.
I have a random name on the last one.
Oh, I hope you get it right. That would be amazing.
I'll save it for the end.
Yeah.
Like I did last time with the Merrill one. Okay, so like maybe an all-star, maybe not an all-star. It's not going to be De'Aaron Fox.
Not De'Aaron Fox.
It's not going to be Trey.
Not Trey. You're in the right realm. Like you're saying.
I don't think Harden averaged 20 per game last year.
Not Harden.
Okay. So let's think through other like pseudo primary creators. So
you've went through a lot of the teams. You just haven't mentioned this team.
No,
yet.
I know. Yeah. Like Ant wasn't at 40 last year or the assist number. I haven't gotten there yet. I said Jokic, so it won't be Murray. Okay, looking at your face, it's Jamal Murray.
Well, I couldn't figure out why you said.
Well, so I said Jokic, and you said you haven't gotten to this team yet.
Oh shit, my bad.
Yeah, that's why I was like, wait, so it's not Murray. Okay, so Murray,
my bad. So I screwed you up there. So yeah, Jamal Murray averaged 42.5% from 3 in the regular season on 5.8 attempts and 6.5 assists. My bad. Sorry. Bad clue. Bad clue. Fourth one.
Okay.
What was the name?
Two names. I have two names. The first one is like a little bit more sensible. My first guess was Van Vliet.
It is not. That is a really good guess. I wonder what kept Fred off. Fred Van Vliet.
I think he shot not great to start the year last year, actually.
So Fred was 39%. I mean, he was close. That's a great call, Sam. Here's the other thing. Yeah. He averaged 17.4 points. So he's like right in the realm.
That's what made me like think of the 19 to or the 15 to 20 or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. He's right there.
The second name I had, there's no fucking way it's D'Angelo Russell, right?
Fuck you. Like, no way.
The 15 to 20 points, and has been like a shooter. It's been like only a shooter assist guy is why I said that. Honestly,
41.
There's no way it's like I was sitting there. I was like, there's no way. But he had a killer shooting year was the other thing last year is why I thought about that.
41.5% from 3, 7.2 attempts, 6.3 assists. D'Angelo Russell.
Right, let's pull up the comments and see if people were yelling at me. Okay. Oh wow, the comments got Russell early.
Well,
good for them. Holy shit, guys. Wow.
Interesting. I thought
Russell
that was
like they got LeBron and Russell like very quick.
Maybe this was somewhere that they did it as teammates, because that was going to be my clue to like get you to Russell.
Oh, one of these that they were teammates.
That they were teammates.
Okay.
All right, real quick. 2 guys did it in the playoffs. Can you name
2 guys
the 2?
did it in the playoffs.
And for what it's worth, they barely hit. They both shot exactly 40% from 3.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say like one Nembhard.
No, they
did
were both.
Maxey do it in the playoffs?
Maxey did it in the playoffs.
Yeah.
40% from
Maxey's playoff numbers last year were the craziest fucking thing I think I've ever seen.
29.8 points on 23 attempts, 9.2 3-point attempts, 40%, 5 rebounds, 6.8 assists.
Yeah, I knew Maxey because I recently looked at Maxey's like playoff numbers when we were doing this list, so that's why I knew Maxey.
Yeah.
Okay, give me like a game amount for the next guy to give me like a ballpark on like what round they went to.
He made it through 2 rounds at least. Played deep into the playoffs.
Played deep into the playoffs.
Double-digit playoff games.
Double-digit playoff games. Okay, that's good enough. Murray didn't shoot it well in the playoffs. I don't think Shea would have gotten to the attempt number, did he?
It's not Shea. I'll look where he was. Yeah, I mean, so the attempt
Kyrie.
number is not Kyrie.
No? Okay.
No. Shea in the playoffs was, he just didn't get the attempt numbers. He shot 43%. Goodness. Shea is 43% from 3 in the playoffs for his career. Wow.
Yeah, Shea's insane. Shea's so good at basketball.
He's really, really good at basketball.
Okay. Thinking through guys that went deep. I mean,
Kyrie, 39%.
Eric White didn't get to the assist number. I don't think any of the Celtics guys would have gotten to the assist number. I don't think Edwards got to the assist number. I don't think that Murray shot like shit. Jokic shot like shit. Trying to think of the last 8 teams. I mean, did Halliburton do it?
No. Tatum would have been the only Celtic to get the assist numbers, and he shot 28% from 3.
Yeah, he shot terribly from 3. Okay. So, and you said it's not Nemhard. I mean, did Brunson do it again?
No, not Jalen Brunson. It is a new player.
It is a new player. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, Brunson shot 31% from 3 in the playoffs.
Mitchell? No, Mitchell got hurt, so it wouldn't be Mitchell.
It was a conference finals team.
The conference finals team? Okay, so Minnesota, Dallas, Indiana, and Boston. So, is it Luka? Minnesota, Dallas. I said the 2 Dallas guys. Boston, it's not. Is it Pascal?
I mean, so you've said the person's name at this point. Like you kind of scathed over it. So I don't know. I didn't count it as an attempt.
Oh, who was it?
It was Ant. Ant did it.
Did he really?
Yep.
Yeah, I actually would not have guessed Ant. Okay.
Yeah. 40 right at 40% on 7.2 attempts, 6.5 assists.
Yeah, it was the assists that would I wouldn't have guessed the assist number is why.
So,
but it makes sense because he had the ball in his hands more often in the playoffs. Yeah, that was a good one. I like that.
So next one are team stats. I'm gonna change it up a little bit. So I have a team regular season numbers and team playoff numbers for you.
All right.
So
let's do it. I'm excited.
Yes.
I'm excited. This is great.
I'm sorry. I cussed at you. I'm really sorry. I've tried not to.
Yeah. You should apologize to me for cursing. That's definitely a thing that should happen.
I try not to curse, and you was like, no effing way. He got that again. So like my natural instincts came out. So my bad.
Yeah. I love how you are worried about cursing when you're talking to me of all people. Okay. Last quick thing here. Have you seen that Fedor Zugic committed to Creighton?
Yeah, so I wasn't overly familiar with this. I saw this on Twitter today and was surprised to be getting this news on August 22nd.
Are you aware? Have you seen my tweet about it yet?
I have not.
How many professional games do you think Fedor Zugic has played in the last 4 years?
So since we're talking about it, I assume 50, 60.
He has played 192 professional games in the last 4 years of his career. And he's been like a professional. He was a like pseudo professional. He's playing for the student center in Pogorelica, the same one that the Aviciches were playing at.
Okay.
Before then, like in the 2 years before that, 2 or 3 years before that. But then for the last 4 years, he's played professional basketball. Look, like if this is what we're doing now, I'm totally good with it, right? Like kids want to come over, get a college degree, play basketball. They think it's a better situation for them. They will obviously get paid. I'm not here telling anybody that, you know, they shouldn't be allowed to do that, right? And in general, like if this is where we're going, it's fine with me. I'm totally good with it.
Yeah.
This dude has played 192 professional basketball games. If this is where we're at with college basketball, seriously, like some college team should try to like recruit like a 25-year-old professional player who's like a starter, like on a like really, really high level team and just see what happens.
Yeah.
At this point.
I mean,
really press the issue. This is pressing the issue. I had a couple college coaches like ask me about this with Zugic beforehand. And I was like, yeah, like I think he's a high major player. Like he can shoot it. You know, he's smart. Like he knows how to play. But like, how the fuck are you going to get him eligible? He's played 190 professional games the last 4 years. And they were like, you know, they think they can get him eligible. So, you know, whatever. But seriously, this is pressing the issue. Press it as far as we can go. Like, go crazy. See what happens. Try and get somebody that no longer has draft eligibility and see what happens.
Well, it just sucks for the guys that came before, right? That missed half a season because they played in some summer league that they weren't supposed to or whatever.
Totally.
Like that's who this sucks for, right? Is just and I know
Avicic had to sit out last year forever.
Yeah.
While they figured out his situation. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy to me.
it is. It absolutely is.
Yeah. Like if this is what college basketball is in general, I'm not like opposed to it. I'm just saying that this one's pressing the issue.
Yeah.
Pretty substantially. And I would imagine the NCAA will like really go through and like figure out what's going on. But I'm truly fascinated.
Yeah.
Fascinated by it all.
Yeah. It will set an interesting precedence, like you say, for other teams to, like you say, press the issue.
Maybe the like rule of thumb is if you haven't gone through the draft process yet, like then you're eligible to play college basketball if you repay or, you know, whatever it is. Right. I don't know what the rules are going to be, but this one is aggressive, Bryce.
It's a lot of games.
This one's aggressive. 192 professional games. That's pretty funny. Cause I remember like watching him when he was like 18 and people thought he might be a draft prospect and he wasn't really, but you know, interesting world we live in now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah. At Motor City Hoops on Twitter, follow over there for anything I'm doing, any content I'm putting out. Whenever games start back up again, it'll be a lot. NBA draft stuff will start up really, really soon with a lot of content. So follow me over there. You can see podcasts, content, breakdowns. And then of course, right here, Sam Vecenie Game Theory Podcast, where part 3, the top 9 coming to you in a few days.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We will be back on Sunday, probably at this point, unless, you know, something crazy like Brandon Ingram getting traded happens or whatever. Right. You know, who knows, but that's the plan. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.